everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from August 19th, 2022, and I'm recording this on February 18th, actually 17th. You'll see this on the 18th, February 17th, 2023. I give those dates because the market is always moving and changing, so I want you to know when this information is actually relevant about what's going on with these particular comic books. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. We look back at those two lists to try to get an understanding of what books were hot, what factors made them hot 6 months ago, and what has happened to them since. So we all make a little better decisions about what books to pursue in the moment and what books to be patient on. If you've been following along recently, you know patience has usually paid off. We will see if that continues as we continue into 2023. This week we got 18 books to talk about. They're not organized the way they normally are because much like what's been happening recently, that week Tom's list was a little later. So I did the it's the CBSI books and plus the 8 books that were different between the two lists that are at the end. So without further ado, let's dig into this list. First up, we have Sandman number 13, the first appearance of Lady Constantine. This had to do with the release of the Sandman show. Obviously, the rights to John were a little messed up here, so they used his ancestor, Lady Constantine, which does appear in the comic originally, to fill kind of both roles here. Back then, 9.8s were all the way up to $325. Now, a 9.8 will cost you about $225, but that's only one sale, and that sale was all the way back in November. So I'm not even sure it would cost you that much right now to get one. Raw copies on this are only like $5 to $15. So this has definitely turned into a bit of a trap. Definitely a book that was worth being patient on. I really enjoyed the way they portrayed the character in the show, but yeah, definitely a book that was worth being patient. Next, we have Dark Spaces Wildfire number 1 for the second week in a row. This hit the list. At this point, it was still only $10 to $15, despite making it on 2 weeks in a row. Optioned before issue 2 even came out, which is usually actually a bad sign, not a good sign, because they haven't given it time to see how the audience is actually going to react before they're optioning in it. So doesn't mean anything's going to come to out of it. So 10 to 15 back then, now $1 to $10 book. I'll be back only because it had so little distance to go for real. So yeah, definitely a book that would have been worth being patient on. Next, we're going to move into some cover movie stuff. We have Predator number 1. The Raza C2E2 variant only. Last week we talked about the Virgin, which was limited to 1,000. This week we're talking about the trade dress that was actually limited to 600. So there's actually fewer of the trade dress. This one was 160 to 180 back then, and now it is a 60 to 110 book. So yeah, that's a big old trap. 9.8 only costs you 100 to 200. So there's even overlap 9.8 with some of the raws. So yeah, this one definitely turned into a big giant trap. And definitely would have been worth being patient on. This is borderline dumpster fire here, getting close to that territory. Next, we have just a pure cover, and this is Shirtless Bear Fighter number 2, number 1. So series number 2, number 1. This Paulo Rivera 1 in 10 variant, which is kind of a throwback to kind of a good girl golden age kind of cover. Back then, this 1 in 10 was going for $25. Now it's a $15 to $20 book, so still above ratio, but definitely an I'll be back for this one. All right, with that, we're going to move into Batman number 125. This is the second print Jorge Jimenez 1 in 25 foil with failsafe on the cover. So we got a second print, a foil, a 1 in 25, all mixed in here of a new character or new villain. Back then, raw copies were going for $50 to $60. Now it's a $30 to $50 book, which is fairly typical. Only pretty much following the rules, just barely got above double ratio, fell back to between ratio and double. 9.8 on this will cost you $125, so another I'll be back for sure on this one. Next, we have The Mandalorian number 2, the Jim Chung 1 in 50. This is a rule breaker. This one back then. This one at 50 was going for $75 to $85 back then, which not even double ratio, which usually means it's going to end up below ratio. In this case, this book is actually done pretty well. It's now a $75 to $125 book. So it's actually crept up some. 9.8 to cost you $2 to $250. So instead of that trap I expected, it has actually become a straight cash homie book. It's kind of moved up. Not a ton, but it's definitely moved up in value over the 6 months. Next, we got a little bit of Sony Spiders here. We got Web of Spider-Man number 118, first appearance of Scarlet Spider. And this didn't have to do with the Dark Web event. This had to do with a toy reveal for Across the Spider-Verse, which had people chasing this book back then. Raw copies for this first Ben Reilly as Scarlet Spider were up to $100. 9.8 was hitting $1,000, and now it's a $40 to $75 book. 9.8, $500 to $600. So this book has definitely turned into a trap. It's kind of returned to where it was prior to any of that buzz. So definitely a book that would have been worth being patient on. Next, we have Meet the Skrulls, number 1. This is a book, rumors that Amelia Clark's character was going to be this Aguila character, which is a Skrull that first appears here. I think since then we've gotten better rumors that that's not who she's going to be. I think it's right now raw copy. Back then raw copies were $20 to $25, and now raw copies are $5 to $15. 9.8 going for $80 to $100. I never really believed they were going to make Amelia Clark this sort of minor of a character. It sounds like everybody at this point believes she's going to be Abigail Brand. So I was still kind of hoping for a Jessica Drew / Skrull Queen use of Amelia Clark, but we'll see. We will see when we get Secret Wars. Or not, Secret Invasion, sorry. Next, we have Avengers number 85, the first appearance of the Squadron Supreme. This was rumors that they were going to appear in the Ant-Man movie. It's out. I have not gotten to see it. I'm actually going to go see it after I record this, but before I post it, so we'll see. But rumors they were going to be working for Kang in the Ant-Man movie. Back then cost 9.8 to hit 5,400. Now, it's hard to say what a 9.8 is. Last sale was actually September, so only a month after that high sale, and it was $5,000. Right now, raw copies will cost you $30 to $50, so definitely down overall. But we're putting it in I'll Be Back. Maybe more of a trap, actually, if you had a sale recently, but there just haven't been any sales recently to compare with. And yes, I hear the cat going nuts, but hopefully she'll calm down enough I can finish. All right, we got 8 more books. So this is where we're shifting from the CBSI list to the Tom list, or at least the ones that weren't overlap. First up, we have Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, number 1. Another Disney ride getting a movie, and this is the comic of that Disney ride. Back then, raw copies were going for $8. Now they're $1 to $10. And I've never quite understood chasing these comics because there's no guarantee that the movie is going to follow anything close to the comic storyline. But definitely a down and an I'll Be Back. 1 second. So while past me is letting the cat into the office, I want to talk about the book I forgot to mention, which was Star Wars number 26. I hit the list because there were 8 new first appearances. Caused raw copies at release to jump to $15 to $20. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. So far, none of these characters have really mattered. 9.8 will only cost you $35 to $60. So another down and an I'll Be Back on this Star Wars book. Okay, everyone, you can see the cat managed to finagle her way in. Or maybe not. I don't know if she's on the screen or not. But we got 7 more books, and next up we have Frank Miller presents Ashcan number 1, and she's already gone. Introducing his new publishing company. Back then, raw copies were going for $15. Now, raw copies are $1 to $10. Definitely another book that turned into, even though it's such a low value, definitely turned into a trap, as you can get it for basically, less than half, or approximately half is what it's going for now. Next, we have 8 Billion Genies, number 1 on the list. Again, this book was on the list all the time last fall and last summer. Back then, hot book, option news, all of it was going together to make everybody chase this book. Back then, raw copies were going for $30. 9.8 was up to $190, or $189, I think, back then. Raw copies now are still 15 to 50, 9.8, 90 to 150. So kind of put this in the steady I'll be back. You could argue steady worth it on the raw side, but I'll be back definitely on the 9.8 side. Definitely a book that still has a lot of interest. We're still waiting for the finale. We'll see if it ultimately pays off. And she's back again. So with that, we got just a few more books. We have Sandman Special #1, the first appearance of Destruction. And this was basically, we didn't get Destruction in season 1, but there was people that thought we might get him like in a season 2. So there was a buzz about this book. Back then, raw copies were going for 5 to 10. 9.8 hit 90, which is not all that much, but definitely there was an 800% increase in sales, so that's why Tom and them were talking about it. Now, raw copies are 1 to 15, 9.8, 75 to 100, so this is kind of a steady worth it. Basically, the values are really pretty much the same. It wasn't, sales numbers are down in terms of just the number of sales, but price-wise, it's still right in the same area as it was 6 months ago. All right, next we have Power Man and Iron Fist #58, the first appearance of Aguila, a character that was rumored to appear in She-Hulk. He did appear in She-Hulk. Back then we had a 900% increase in copies. It was a $5 to $15 book. Now it's a $5 to $20 book, so a steady worth it for sure on this one, in the same range with a few sales a little higher. Your absolute definition almost of a steady worth it on this particular one. So there has been some sustained interest here, but there wasn't really much room for this book to go down the other way. And yeah, people apparently are still at least somewhat interested in this character in this book. 3 books to go. Next we have Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars #7, the first appearance of Titania, but also the first appearance of the second Spider-Woman, Julia Carpenter. So we got 2 firsts here, but this is all about Titania for She-Hulk, but also a little bit of Julia Carpenter for Madam Web. Back then, raw copies on this book were going for 10 to 30. 9.8s are hitting 275 to 310. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8, 170 to 225. This has turned into a trap. We got away from the She-Hulk show. I know it was somewhat divisive in terms of what people thought of that show and even that character. But yeah, so this book is definitely kind of backed up to where it's really been long term. All right, 2 left. We have Amazing Fantasy #1 from 2004, the first appearance of Anya Corazon. And this had everything to do with rumors she was going to be in the Madam Web movie, plus the Edge of the Spider-Verse. She was going back to the Aranya name. She was kind of getting a new costume, was going to be prominent in this new crossover that's still going on right now, Into the Spider-Verse or whatever in the comics. So a couple different things drawing some interest to Anya. Back then, raw copies were going for 30 to 50, 9.8 going for 2 to 215. Now it's a $25 to $50 book, 9.8, 150 to 175. So another steady kind of I'll be back. Definitely I'll be back on the 9.8 side, but the raw side is right in that same range, very steady. So that is where this book is at. Still doing pretty well. So character I enjoy when she does appear. I've enjoyed her in several formats, but still kind of a minor spider character compared to some of the others for sure. Last book on the list this week. We've had several steadies. We get one more. This is New Mutants 87, the first appearance of Cable. And this had to do with rumors of a recast for Deadpool 3. The Cable was going to appear again, but it was going to be recast since they already used Josh Brolin for Thanos. I don't know why you couldn't use him for Cable as well. Who cares? He was a big purple CGI alteration / he didn't really look like, personally, I wouldn't bother me if they used him again. But anyway, there was rumors of a recast, but that he would still appear in Deadpool 3. So that's why this book hit the list. Raw copies were going for 175 back then. 9.8 was going for 575. Now raw copies are 75 to 200. So, overlapping that same range. 500 to 700 on a 9.8. So we put this as a steady worth it category. So great book, great character, and it's still doing pretty well. So that is this week's list. We had 18 books to talk about. And I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.